hear you. Let's rock and roll. So I'm going to share a screen, and first you're going to see my like ADD, a million tabs. Just ignore those. And then I'm going to put it into presentation mode and we'll be off to the races. So here we go. Everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So welcome to our module on models and metrics. If Andy was the geek of the week last week talking about tracking, I am the geek of the week when it comes to models and metrics.
Exactly.
I've been very fortunate that I've done this for a very long time, since 2004. So on almost any industry that we go into and any channel, I know exactly what we should be shooting for. And before I even start working with the client, I can tell them whether they're going to be profitable or not. And I imagine many of you are thinking to yourself, like, why would I need to know every single metric inside of a funnel? And I'm going to tell you, it will change your whole life, because so many of us get hired as media buyers, or we get clients as media buyers, and their expectations are completely out of whack. And if you don't properly set expectations from the beginning, it can be an absolute nightmare. So session 4 is going to be metrics and models. And we're going to start off talking about models specifically. So a lot of people have messaged me privately and said, like, what do you mean by a model? So what is a model? A model is something that you prepare before, keyword before you launch ads, that allows you to predict what should happen at each point of your campaign. So it encompasses your traffic metrics, your funnel metrics, and your return on ad spend. Here's the benefits of having a model and showing it to your client or your employer or your team ahead of time. It gives you a roadmap. It gives you very clear goals that you're shooting for inside of your campaign. Number 2, it allows you, once you have traffic running, to quickly diagnose the highest priority of your next focus. Okay. And it shows your client exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it. It also helps you define if it is realistic for your client to be profitable, or if changes need to be made. And that's a really important one, I think, for a lot of people. And I talked about a little bit when we start off here, is we have clients come in and say, well, do you think, and I had this morning, I legitimately wish I could show you the text. I have a client who's starting on Tuesday who's saying, okay, if we spend $150,000 in 2 months on ads, is it realistic for me to do $450,000 in revenue? And I said to him, well, that depends. Here's all the metrics. It depends on your price point. It depends on if you have 1 product or 2 products. It depends on what your close rate is by your sales team, right? I mean, how many of you have heard that the ads aren't working and you're thinking to yourself, you know, if they have a sales team, well, can your sales team even sell, right? How many of you have been in a position where you're doing amazing on the ads and the client isn't making any money? Well, we took a step backwards probably 3 years ago and said, we will no longer buy media without seeing every step that happens in the business until the sale occurs. And when we got visibility into that, then we were actually able to diagnose, is the problem the ads? Is the problem the offer? Is the problem the sales team? What's the problem that actually has to be focused on? Because nobody likes to admit it, but the reality is, ads can only get so good. There's only so much that you can do with just the ads. And if you're dancing without a partner, and what I mean by a partner is somebody working with you on the offer itself or the sales team, then you're dancing by yourself. And that's pretty boring, and it's going to end pretty quickly, right? So this is going to help you define if it's realistic for your client to be profitable, or if changes need to be made before you even start running traffic. And in many cases with our clients, I'll build this model ahead of time and I'll show them. And in many cases, it's not profitable. And I'll say to them, we can't be profitable unless you do X, Y, and Z. before we start running ads. And I'm not taking you on as a client until you do those, or at minimum, you commit to me that you're going to have them done within 30 days. Because as you can see, Mr. Prospect, you won't make money unless you do these things. So the opposite side of what are the benefits is what are the risks? What's the risk of not having a model before you start running paid media, and even ongoing after you start running paid media? Number one, you don't know if the campaign can even be profitable. You know, it could be the channel, it could be the pricing, it could be the conversions. And this will lead to false expectations being set on your behalf with the client. And it is very difficult to backpedal on expectations that you set incorrectly from the get-go. Number two is you won't know what to focus on next. Once you start running media, there's a lot of different levers that can be pulled. And if you don't have a model and you're not tracking all of these metrics independently in your reporting, you don't know what to focus on next, or even what the real problem is, right? I don't know if people are putting anything in the chat box, Cecilia or Andy, but how many of you have run ads and your metrics look amazing on the ads, but the client or the boss is saying, the ads aren't working. The ads aren't working, right? How many of you have run into that situation? Just put yes in the chat box, of where you have been blamed because the ads aren't working. And you're like, I don't know, man, my ad metrics are phenomenal. You know, something's broken on your end. No, the ads aren't working, right? Number three, are there people saying me?
Yes, and then Mahai says, amen to that. Great marketing cannot make up for faulty sale and delivery systems.
That is such a great quote. And we say to our clients all the time, the best traffic in the world can't fix a shit offer. Sorry, right? So, you know, that's the reality. You have no diagnostic tool. This is a big one. You have no diagnostic tool to show your client that they're making progress and getting closer. So especially when we're starting with a new offer, when we're meeting with clients weekly and we're showing them our goal metrics in the model, and then we are telling them every week where we're putting our focus. And then the next week we come back and we've improved those metrics, and they can see that when this model lines up, it guarantees profitability. So when we show them, hey, here's where we're at with this, with this, with this, with this, with this, with this, and then the next week we come back and we say, look at all the improvements that we made. There's far less panic in the eyes of the client, because they can see that we have a goal and we're progressing and that they're making traction, versus it being a zero-sum game. When you don't do this, it's a zero-sum game. Am I making money or am I not making money? Right? There's a lot of variables between am I making money and am I not making money? And if you can show them the variables are improving, then it calms the client down tremendously and allows you to do your job, which is test and improve, right? Number 4 on this list is, if you don't have model metrics to start off with and you're not tracking them ongoing with your campaigns, you don't have any data. You don't have a tool to look at for other clients to see if you can leverage the data and the things that you're doing to improve on other clients and leverage them into your other accounts. This is a big one. At any given time, I can pull up the models and the reporting for roughly 50 clients. And in those 50 clients, I might have 6 or 7 that are similar funnels, similar niches, similar audiences. And I can look at them side by side and I can say, well, my client right now is weak in this area. Let me look at the other ones and see who's the strongest. Well, this guy over here, he's the strongest. Let's look at their ads. Let's look at their funnel. Let's look at their sales team, whatever the case may be, and leverage from one into another, right? So this is a tool where you can leverage what you're doing with clients you have now, with clients that you've had historically, and even, as you'll see, with clients in the future, right? So when we have clients come on and they say, well, I'm not sure if we want to hire you, here's our offer, here's our funnel type, here's our budget. Do you think you can make this work? I can quickly pull up a similar historical client or one that we have now and look at what worked, what this client has, and I can answer them with complete transparency of whether or not we can actually get them the result. And if we can't, I can tell them why, what they would need to change, and what they would need to fix. right? So these are the risks of not having models and reporting to go along with them. Now, models are something that can be modified with experience. The numbers that you will see today on some of the models that I will show you are not the same metrics that they were 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I mean, how many of you guys remember the good old day of Facebook 7 years ago where you could throw any piece of garbage up and get a 5% click-through rate and $3 leads? That doesn't exist anymore. But some people still have that expectation in their head, and you need to correct that expectation before you start running traffic, or else expectations are going to be brutal and you're going to get chewed up, right? So the great thing about models is that they're fluid, right? You can modify your models based on what you see happening in the marketplace and your personal achievements. If you beat the current baseline model that you've created for yourself in some areas, right? Record it and set it as your new goal baseline for that channel and that industry, right? Theoretically, if we're always testing and we're always getting better, then there's going to be different baseline models and metrics that you change based on your improving skill set, right? Another one is costs are always going up, right? Our Facebook rep told us again, hey, costs are going up. Not surprising. They do it pretty much every 6 months, maximum 1 year, right? So when you're building your models, you want to make sure that you keep an eye on your averages and adjust where necessary. My personal experience is that when we're talking about costs for traffic, you probably should only be adjusting it about once per year max, right? The challenge with adjusting your models too often based on what you're seeing is sometimes what you end up doing is you end up either shooting too high or shooting too low. So when you're sucking, you bring all of your model metrics down to justify the fact that you're sucking. And when you're killing it, you set the bar way too high. And that brings us to the last point, which is that you never want to create pie in the sky models for your clients. You want to be conservative, and you can use hours as your baseline. Now, what I mean by that is if I look at all 50 clients right now, I can find, one landing page, for example, that has an 87% opt-in rate. If you now set the baseline at 87% for landing page opt-ins for all your clients, you're going to fall short a lot, right? If you have an e-commerce business and you set your purchase conversion goal at 7.5% across every one of your clients, you're going to be very disappointed often, right? So what you want to do is take your averages and use them, not your outliers, right? You never want to get too married to your wins, and you never want to get too married to your losses. So you want to take your averages and be conservative and use them as the baseline. And fortunately for you guys, later on today, inside of the membership area or inside of Slack, I'm not sure Cecilia will take care of that. I'm going to actually give you I'm going to give you 3 of our models. I'm going to give you our book funnel model, our VSL to strategy session funnel, and an e-commerce model. And I'm going to give them to you with Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok metrics. So for many of you, that's going to cover at least one, if not multiple of your bases that you can now overlay with what you're currently doing or properly set expectations moving forward. And then obviously you can adjust them as you go to fit your particular industry. So you'll be getting those a little bit later on. Now I want to show you guys some visuals. Okay. So I just grabbed one recent client out of all of our stuff. And I know that this might be a little bit hard to see. When I was trying to stretch it bigger, it was taking the whole screen and getting weird, right? So I put it in as big as I could without it getting weird. So as you can see on the blue, on the left-hand side, we have all of our metrics that we're tracking. So in this particular case, you can see in this funnel, we're tracking CPM, cost per click, click-through rate, and that's click-through rate all, cost per outbound click, outbound click-through rate percentage. And I'm just talking about the ones that we have goal metrics for. There's other ones in between. Our cost per lead, our lead conversion, that's our opt-in rate, how many people actually watch the video. So that's video view rate, the average watch time, our cost per initiating strategy session, our our cost per initiating an application, our initiate application percentage, our application conversion goal, our booked call goal, our cost per book call, our booked call conversion, our funnel conversion, our sales conversion, our CPA, and our return on ad spend. So obviously there's things they have to fill in between, which is why there's gaps in the goal metrics. Because if you look at like landing page views, for example, we don't have a goal for landing page views. That's just a stat that is happening, right? So you can see in the date range, there's 1,793 from 3rd to 19th, right? Or 13th to 19th. But all of our goal metrics are set up along the left-hand side of our spreadsheet. And then what we do is we fill them in on a weekly basis to see where we're at. And this gives you an instant diagnostic tool to look at and ask yourself, what should I be doing? Because if everything lines up perfect and guarantees profitability, as you can see from the goal metric column, if everything lines up the way I want from the beginning, I'm getting a 10 times return ad spend. Who on this call would like to get a 10 times return ad spend for their client? Just put yes in the chat box if that would make your client or your employer happy, right? Yes, everybody would be happy, right? If not, you need to get a new client or quit your job, one of the two. So I know that if we line all these things up the way they are, and you can see on the bottom left-hand corner, I put product cost 15,000. So this is one of the variables for this equation that allow this to work. If the product cost in this particular case was 5,000 for you math geniuses, and everything lined up exactly the same way, what would the return on ad spend be? I'll wait. Somebody can answer. Anybody?
This is math.
Okay. If the product cost was 5,000, not 15,000, and all these metrics remained the same, what would the return on ad spend be if we hit all of our goal metrics? Anybody answer correct yet, Cecilia, or anybody answer at all?
Someone says same, I guess, same.
Nope, that's incorrect. Anybody else?
3 times?
Correct. Close enough. I won't hold you accountable to the 3.33, right? If all of the metrics remain the same, my CPM, my cost per click, my opt-in rate, my cost per book call, my close rate, if everything else remained the same, but I only had a $5,000 product, my return on ad spend would be 3.33, not 10x. So when I'm initially talking to a client, like I talked to him this morning, and he says, if I give you $150,000 in this particular funnel with this particular channel, can I do $450,000 in revenue? My answer to him was, well, that depends. Can your sales team close at 20%? Can your offer get these metrics in between? What's your price point? And he said, well, my price point's 5K. I said, then you probably can do 450,000 because it's 3.33 times it's a 3.33 return on ad spend because you got a $5,000 product. I told him it'd be better if it was 7,800 or 10, because if we put it in this same model, you can see how that return on ad spend increases. So I'd highly suggest that you increase the cost of your product, but that's obviously up to you, right? Do you guys understand how building this out ahead of time and going through every conversion metric and the product price and everything that's associated with you puts the power in your hands to tell the client what is realistic and what isn't realistic, whether that be your cost per lead, whether that be your booked call cost, whatever it might be. When you can map this out ahead of time and say, these are my conservative expectations of where we're going to end up, doesn't that make it easier to have that conversation with your client or your prospect ahead of time? I'm obviously not looking at the chat. Hopefully everyone's saying yes.
Absolutely. Yes.
Right?
Yes, definitely.
So we do this ahead of time. And then here's what happens when we launch, right? So when we launch, I just took the same example, right? We prioritize by color coding our model on a weekly basis. So as you can see from the exact same campaign, I just took the last week, July 4th to July 10th, which is just a garbage week for marketing in general on July 4th. But hey, it's fun for this example. So our goal lead conversion, our goal opt-in rate is 25%. That week, they were 17.84, gets a red, right? The average watch time that we're looking for on this particular client's VSL is 60%. They're at 53. It gets a red. The application conversion rate, right? So for us, it's people who click the application to actually completing it. Our goal is 50%. They have 42%. That gets a red. The booked call percentage, and we'll talk about this in a second because you guys are going to be like, what? Right? Our goal is if somebody finishes an application and gets to a calendar, they should be booking on the calendar page at 90%, right? But in this particular case, the client is only getting 27%, right? The finishing of the, the sales conversion, once they book a call, our goal is 20%. They're at 16%. That gets a red. So now we've got, 6 reds. Now we have to look at it and we have to say, what am I going to focus on first? What's going to move the needle the fastest? Because when I'm looking, did anybody notice that in this example, none of the problem is the ads? How many times have someone said, your ads suck? Really? Because when I look, Mr. Prospect, at my goals, I'm trying to get a $2 cost per click. I'm getting $1.14. I'm trying to get a 3% click-through rate. Okay, that's on the creative side. It's at 111. Okay, maybe we could look at spicing up the imagery or the videos, but our goal cost per outbound click is $5. It's at 285. Our goal outbound CTR should be 1.5%. Okay, it's at 0.45. Maybe that could use some work. Maybe we need some copy work. But at the end of the day, we're getting our outbound clicks at $2.85 and our goal is 5. So when we look at, brass tacks numbers, is there some work to be done there? Yes, but we're beating our goal per outbound click by a tremendous amount at 285, right? When we look at our cost per lead, our goal for cost per lead with this client is $20 and we're getting it for 13.23. So again, this doesn't look like it's a problem in the traffic, in the targeting, it doesn't really look like a problem there. When we go down the line, the opt-in rate at 17.84, okay, maybe we could focus there. The average watch time of the VSL, 53 to 60, maybe we could focus there, but it's a small percentage that we're looking at. The application conversion at 42% versus 50%, meh, right? I don't know. The booked call percentage. Well, this client, I love this client, right? Said to this client, why is there so few people submitting an application and actually booking a call? Well, this client is bombarded with applications and calls and their sales team isn't big enough. And he's part of the sales team and he likes to take vacations all the time. So rather than me focusing on all the stuff above there, I can go back to the client and say, Mr. Client, we should be at 90% conversion on your calendar page after someone fills out an application. Let's go have a look at your calendar page today, Mr. Client. Oh, I wonder why. There's one spot available today and one spot available tomorrow and no more spots till Wednesday. You know who the problem is in this equation, Mr. Client? It's you and your sales team. Right? So rather than being in a position of freaking out and being like, oh my God, it's the ads, it's the funnel, because I've got this diagnostic tool, I can go straight to the client and say, you're dropping the ball, sort your life out. And here's why. And then they go, okay, sorry. So this client, as you can see, has been at 23% to 27% for the last month because he's in a massive hiring spree, trying to bring on new sales team, train them, get them up to speed and open up his calendar so people can actually book on it, which would bring us to the 90% range, right? Our booked call costs, they're supposed to be $200. They're at 116. We got no problem. We can scale the hell out of this. You got to open your calendar, miss, sir, whatever. right? Sales conversions, I'd like to be at 20%, but it's a 15K product. I'm going to cut you some slack and let you be at 16%. I'm okay with that. And the reason I'm okay with that is because you're at a 19 return on ad spend. So I'm not going to bust your balls too much on your sales close rate. But hey, if we could get more calendar spots here, you might be at a 20 to 30 return on ad spend. So when we create this diagnostic tool and then we color code it, then we can kind of look at where's the biggest burning fire and go attack the thing that actually matters versus the things that don't matter. They're not a bigger priority right now. And if you want, some of my team will put the greens in green because they like to flash their success in the face of the client. Like, look at all these greens, right? And sometimes if they're like within 10%, they'll put them yellow to be like, oh, we're close here. And then they'll put the reds in red. And pretty common in your first week of running traffic, the majority of it's going to be red. So then you have to look at where's the thing that's going to move the needle the most, right? And you got to prioritize that and focus in on that first. So I'm going to stop there for questions because actually, yeah, I'll stop there for questions because I'm really going to talk about reporting and how you can display it to your client in a second. But I want to stop there because this, at least for my team, when we built out all of the models for my media buyers in my team about 3 years ago, and as they put it, I got the math out of my head onto a spreadsheet. So they actually knew what they were supposed to be focusing on. They said it was the biggest game changer they'd ever had as a media buyer. So I'm wondering if any of you guys are doing this already, if this is a new concept for you, if you're like, holy cow, this is amazing. I'd love to hear feedback and questions.
So we do have some questions. The first is from Ben, who says, is ROI more important than ROA?
So go ahead, Andy. I know you want to jump in and say something.
Yeah, I wanted to say something. So yes, there is obviously a difference. So return on ad spend is very different from return on investment. So
yep,
return on investment is obviously another calculation where you are adding in your OPEX or operational expenditure in the business. So obviously when we use the word profitable, we've got to be careful. You have to appreciate that we're talking it in the terms of ROI, ROA or ROAS, return on ad spend. Now, ROI is obviously more important. Now, if they have a lot of high fixed costs in their business, or they're paying, I don't know, salespeople 45% commissions, then they have a business operational problem, not an ad or a model problem, if that makes sense. So one of the things that we do is that we actually insist with our clients that we see their P&L, because I want to do, or we want to do a sanity check that they don't have ridiculous amounts of expenses in their business, that no matter that we get a 55,000 ROAS, they've got so many expenses because they're paying their people gold plated, whatever, Rolex watches or whatever. And there's no chance that my ads will ever work because their OPEX is just way too expensive. So yes, ROI is more important than ROAS, because at the end of the day, a business is, the purpose of business is to create a customer and generate a profit, unless you're a non-profit, of course, which is different. So yes, the answer to the question, ROI is more important than ROAS, but.
And we're kind of trying to train you like we operate in our agency. And we found that we had to have complete transparency into everything so we could never be blamed, right? That might be too far of a stretch to ask your client for, or your boss for a P&L. But at least if you have your model set out ahead of time with your realistic expectation on ROAS, then they should be able to take that and match it against their P&L and tell you if this thing can be profitable at the expected ROAS, right? So I believe that as a media buyer, your return on ad spend model is exponentially more important than your ROI model. Once you start to get into the agency world, then you have to, if you want to go that extra step of seeing their P&L and seeing how it will match up, it's a great thing to do, because quite frankly, the majority of businesses online are so financially messed up that no matter how good you do, they still can have trouble. So oftentimes we have to go in and look at their P&Ls and say, what are you doing here? This is a disaster. You need to fix a couple of your cogs or your how you're paying your sales team or, whatever, right? You got an office with 10,000 square feet, it's crazy. So what other questions came up, Cecilia?
From Mahai, we have, what if they claim that lower CPCs came with lower quality leads?
That's a great question. And we will talk a little bit later on about pulling levers, right? So there's 4 ways to pull quality control levers. One is in your messaging of your ads. Another one is in messaging of your offer, right? One is in, if you have, for example, a strategy session funnel, it's in qualification, it's in filtration and qualification. And another one is in bidding structure. So there's 4 ways to pull levers. It kind of depends on what you're dealing with. But the reality is that if you see all of these metrics lining up in your model, it guarantees profitability. So if they're coming back to you saying, hey, this is a lower quality lead, no problem. We'll pull one of these levers and we'll adjust the model a little bit on the front, maybe in our cost per click or our cost per application or our cost per add to cart or whatever to get there. But the reality is that math is not an opinion. If all of these numbers line up, we're profitable. So you trying to turn the finger and point back at me when I'm getting all of these lined up the way I'm supposed to means we've got a problem in either the product or the offer or the sales team or whatever, right? And that's where your confidence kind of comes into the equation. And remember what we talked about in our first module, you got to be kind of crazy to do this job. And I will say this is most of my clients call me, I don't know if I should use the word because I don't like swearing on this, but I'll just say most of my clients call me the nicest asshole they've ever met, right? I tell them exactly what it's supposed to be, exactly what's going to happen, and exactly what is supposed to happen next. And they love me for it because they're hiring you for your confidence in the ability to get a result. And the moment that you start letting them have control over what happens next and what the plan is and what should be changed, you might think you're doing yourself a favor as a media buyer by listening to the clients. And they came to you because you're supposed to know what you're supposed to do. Right. And the moment that you hand that power over to them, you're dead man walking. So when clients start pushing back on that kind of stuff, I tend to rein them in real quick and bring them back to the math and focus on the math and what it's supposed to be and what needs to be changed to get them the result. But it's not an easy thing to do to gain that confidence. It takes time, it takes experience, it takes guts. But at the end of the day, I'll tell you this. If you don't hold your ground and you don't show them the explanation for why you're doing what you're doing and you start to let them take control, your days are numbered. You always have to be in control and know what's happening next.
Yeah. And I would add to that, if you don't communicate effectively these issues, you're going to lose the opportunity or the client or the confidence with your boss anyways. So what have you got to lose? Right? You've got to make sure that you communicate all of these elements out effectively at the right time, which is why we keep these scorecards. And you've noticed it's a Monday through to Sunday business. We do that on purpose, by the way. That 7 days is because just between a Monday and a Sunday, a lot can change. There's cyclical or there's variations. You're dealing with live people, live markets. We've had clients that say to us, why haven't we got 60 calls today? Why haven't we got 55 calls today or whatever it is? The reality is that you're going to a live market and there are lots of different reasons why. So that's why we look at a 7-day window when we're looking at this. So July the 4th, for example, to the 10th, you can clearly see that's a Monday through to a Sunday. That's how we do it.
And I'll bring up this next one and let's keep doing questions. But I think it also kind of references what you were just talking about a second ago. But let's take some more questions for a sec.
Yep.
So, and Mahai also followed up with, are you looking at the cost per MQL?
Yes. The short answer, marketing qualified lead, yes. It depends how the funnel is structured, meaning that some of our clients in their funnels, and I'm going to refer to an appointment funnel, which is
Yeah, and it's actually a big thing on this one that you can see as well, is this guy disqualifies a significant amount of people out of here, which is why his application conversion and booked call are also lower. It's not just that he has a problem with calendar spots and sales team, is he disqualifies a tremendous amount of people. So based on that, we should probably adjust down on our booked call percentage. I think he disqualifies 40% of the people that apply.
Yep, that's right. So yes, the answer is bottom line, yes.
Great. Chris then says, how do we know what are realistic goal metrics?
See, that's a great question. And that's kind of what I was talking about a little bit earlier, is we're going to supply you with 3 models, right? One is, and they're going to be for Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok with regards to, I just realized I don't have my camera. With regards to Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok for 3 different styles of funnels. So a VSL, the strategy session, a book funnel, and an e-commerce funnel, right? We're not going to give you all 50 that we have because that's just absurd, right? We're going to give you 3 that are pretty foundational. Yeah. If those don't match up with what you have, right, then you need to take an educated guess when you're building yours out, and you're going to see that a lot of the variables are similar. Like your CPM variables are going to be similar. Your cost per click are going to be fairly similar. You know, if you've got an opt-in page, it's going to be similar. Like when we look at opt-in pages, for example, if you want to capture name, email, and phone number, we set it at 20%, which is why, or at 25%, which is why it's 25% on this one. If he's only capturing email, we'll set it at 40%. Right? There's going to be some experience and some educated guessing that comes along from looking at these metrics and doing it yourself for a while to be able to create a model if it's something that's dramatically different from what we're talking about in this boot camp. And like I said earlier on as well, when you're optimizing it, we actually track who are our top 3 performers in each one of these metrics at any given time. So whoever our clients are that have the 3 highest opt-in rates, we have that tracked so that when we're launching a new client, if that client, let's just say is not where we want them to be, we'll quickly look at the other 3 highest performers and look at them back and forth. And we'll take the elements that are missing from that client and we'll match them to the ones that are performing the highest and port them over. So does that answer the question for Crispin, do you think?
Yes, he said yes. So okay. Nicholas, we have for ecom, do you use average order value? If AOV is $100, do you use plus minus 20% for buffer room?
I always just have my goal lined up without buffer room in the model, but you absolutely could do it with buffer room. So when I'm doing a model for an e-commerce store, it's going to change depending on the initial product price. It's also going to change on upsells and downsells. So when I bring a client in, I build models, including 3 upsells and 3 downsells. And I will actually put them at specific product prices in my model from the get-go with conversion rates and obviously the additional cart value that's added with each one. Because oftentimes when I'm working with an e-commerce client, they will come to me selling a product up front and they'll say, can I make this profitable? And my answer 9 times out of 10 is no, not on the first sale. You're going to need these upsells at this product price with this conversion, and I'll list them all out in the model to get to an average cart value that would make them profitable, right? And then obviously I'll do all the other things like say, okay, we need to get, retargeting done through AdRoll. We need to get the product put on Google Shopping. We need to get the product listed on Amazon because 15% of people who come to your site will never buy a product from you ever unless it's on Amazon. And when we add all of these things together, here's going to be the reality of your profitability. Email, right? Are you sending an email out at least 3 times a week? There's another 10% that's going to come, from, and all of these things combined together, that's going to give you the average, revenue, lifetime value, average cart value that you need. And that's why this is sort of a diagnostic tool for you, but it's also a diagnostic tool for your client, is they can see, hey, this is the math, right? If you don't do the things I want you to do, we're not going to be successful no matter what I do. So we need to have these things in place. Does that help answer the question?
I hope so. Maybe Nicholas
Okay.
will chime in. That was his question. Our next question is from Justin. Do you guys calculate a minimum ROAS based on product margin, et cetera?
Minimum ROAS based on product margin. I think you're going more into the ROI question, but I'm not sure. So maybe I need a little bit more clarity on that question.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
from
maybe Justin. Maybe Justin, if you can unmute, by all means, go ahead. If Justin can do that. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I'm here.
So
Go ahead,
could you-
Justin.
Hear
Go
me?
ahead. Yeah, can hear you fine.
Yeah, okay. So I work with an e-commerce business, and we work on, or a calculation that I've found before is calculating minimum ROAS based on product margin. Let me just see if I can find the
So
calculation.
it's taking into consideration the COGS and the
Right.
pricing and everything else.
Yeah, so we've got a, like, say, for example, a 30% product margin. I think I worked out it had to be a minimum of like 2.13 return on ad spend to be
Right.
able to cover the cost of those goods.
Yeah,
that
you're
something-
you're factoring in ROI into the equation, which is fine, right?
Yeah.
You can do that, but I was gonna say it's more for you, but it is for them as well. Is if you're looking at the business model as a whole, and you know that your COGS are X and your goal CPA is X, then your return on ad spend needs to be above X marker, right? But the reality is that usually we separate out ROI versus return on ad spend in our goals, but you certainly could incorporate it in as part of your model for the client or for your internal goals as well.
Yeah. Okay.
great. Elizabeth is saying, to what degree is the e-com model realistically applicable to in-person brick and mortar?
Say that again.
To what degree is the e-com model realistically applicable to an in-person brick and mortar business?
I'm not sure I understand the question there either. I might need a little bit more context to that question.
Maybe
It's
Elizabeth is
from-
here.
Elizabeth.
Hi, everybody. We
Hi,
are
Elizabeth.
we're a brick and mortar mattress store. So if
Okay.
I'm going to model this off of, obviously I can't use a VSL model. I can't use all of these
Oh.
other models. So the closest thing is an e-com, or do you have a brick and mortar concept model that's going to be more applicable? Or how much do I have to adjust an e-com model to make it work for?
So when you say a brick and mortar model, run me through right now where you're sending traffic, like where you're getting your traffic from, where you're sending it to, and what is the goal outcome that you're looking for?
We're going to be running the paid organic model going forward on Facebook.
Okay.
And by doing that, we're going to be obviously sending through the video concept into the warm bucket and so forth and so
Yeah.
forth.
Yeah.
The eventual is either they come into the store, or for higher end customers, they book a special one-on-one appointment to come in for personalized service to try the mattresses. But it's
Okay,
still
so-
have to physically come in because we're not e-com. We don't sell online.
Right. So they have to come in. So then in that particular case, if you were coming to me right now and saying, I need you to develop a campaign for me, I would do exactly what you're talking about, because I know the superfluous benefits of all of the content is going to drive more people into the store. Little bit difficult to track the benefit of that unless you're actually asking them when they buy, where they saw you from, et cetera, et cetera. But the end result that I'd probably be shooting for is basically an appointment schedule model where I'm driving them to, let's say it's a landing page, like something along the lines of enter your information to secure your 5% discount code off of our highest selling mattresses. And then I would take them to the next page and say, let's book an appointment with you to talk to a specialist on X day, which isn't that much different than a VSL to strategy session model. It's just that you would remove the pieces out in the middle around, VSL consumption and watch rates. I mean, maybe you want to put a VSL in there to encourage them to book a call. But that model that you're talking about specifically isn't that much different than what you're seeing inside of here. Because if I was going to do a landing page to let's say a discount coupon or a bonus coupon or something like that, and then an explanation of why they should book an appointment with me and so on and so forth, the only difference might be that because you're geo-targeting, right, you might find that you have to pay more in CPM or more in cost per click because of the size of audience. So in that particular case, you're probably going to have to make an estimated guess in the top part of the model. And then obviously you carry those numbers and push them down through so that you're adjusting your cost per booking and all those other things down. Because obviously if you're increasing your cost per click by 50%, let's just say, and everything else remains the same, then your cost per in-store booking isn't going to be $200. It's going to be $400. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Right. So you can take that and adjust that and push that down. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Elizabeth,
You're welcome.
One other thing I would add, though, is that when you do get people into the store and they do make a purchase, as long as you get the right data, like their email address, and it has to be the email address they use with Facebook.
Which we do.
But as long as if you get that email because maybe you need it for guarantee or something like that, that you're offering a 10-year or 20-year guarantee on the mattress, you need their email, you need their name, you need their address. You can upload that through offline conversions, which we talked about this week on Tuesday. You can upload that information into your Facebook ad account because they're called offline conversions. And then what will happen is that it will be able to assign to the videos and all the things that you've been doing on the advertising side. You'll be able to say, look at that video is the one that's bringing in A, more people to my store, and B, it's the one that's giving me the most revenue. And so you
and the other thing that I would, sorry, and I didn't mean to interrupt you. Do you work, is this a client of yours, Elizabeth?
No, it's my store.
It's your
But
store. Okay.
My company, I'm setting this up for my store in Chicago, but my franchise has 470 locations, and I'm setting the system up for 5 other urban locations as well as mine.
Perfect. So then what I would want to do if it was my business or I was setting it up for other people in the future is I would demand of the people that I'm working with in the future that when somebody buys, that they have some type of questionnaire of where did you see us, right? Because the bottom line conversion metrics of, hey, this person came to my funnel, booked an appointment with a specialist, et cetera, that might only end up being 30% of your overall sales compared to the awareness campaigns that you created in the cold bucket. So I want to be able to get credit for the overall success of the campaign, not just the numbers that are directly correlated with a last touch booked appointment. Does that make sense?
At that point, it is sufficient to have the email address or the phone number connected to the Facebook account.
Yeah, I think you can, because that's gonna suffice. But even if for some reason it doesn't track that data, imagine having a client saying, okay, we did a quick survey with every person who bought. And just like, even if it's just at the counter when they buy, hey, first things first, can you tell about where you heard us from? Oh, I saw you on Facebook, right? All of a sudden in a month, if their mattress sales go from 100 to 200 and they can account for 10 coming directly from your appointment book schedule, but all of a sudden 50 of them say, I saw your ad on Facebook, you got a significantly better leg to stand on with that client. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we're able to track pretty carefully where people are coming in. Marketplace, Facebook Marketplace because it's intent driven, Facebook because it's not intent driven, and Google intent driven. So we're able to sort this out, and then flyers or Google Gorilla and whatnot.
Yeah, it's one of those things that when we start with any client, the number one thing we want to make sure we can do is take as much credit as possible for the results that we're driving.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
Well, we have quite a few questions. I think we need an entire boot camp on this.
Okay, well, let's keep moving, and then let's maybe take some of those at the end. So I'm going to move into reporting suggestions. Okay, because I know that templates and frameworks are always nice to have to help you organize your stuff, right? So every one of my media buyers is responsible for creating this for external reporting to the client. So they have a spreadsheet that shows their goal metrics, their lifetime stats, their last 7 days, and their month by month. So we can have this just as, hey, here's the goal metrics and here's where we are lifetime. That's cool. It's better than what most people do, right? But breaking it out and having it last 7 days and by month really goes and shows the extra step, especially when somebody wants to look at quickly, like, how are we tracking? Oh, we're tracking up or down in the last 7 days. How are we doing lifetime? How are we doing on a monthly basis? It's also nice to look back historically and see if there's seasonality associated with month to month, right? So when you break this out from a reporting standpoint, right? And I'm sure there's, Supermetrics or something that can help you auto-populate these things. I actually make my team do them automatically because I want them to feel the pain of putting them in if they suck and focus on what's going on, right? But this is a sample style of reporting. This is a screenshot. So I can't scroll on the June and July. But if I had this as a live document, you'd see I could scroll back 9 months and it would show every single month because the June, July portion is actually a scrollable screen for them. So from a reporting standpoint, I love being able to look at goal metrics, lifetime stats, last 7 days and month to month. And the clients do too, because they feel like, wow, we've got complete transparency into what's going on. So that's just another thing that might assist you in your media buyer journey. So what I want to do right now is I just want to pivot to some general goal statistics from a traffic perspective for you guys. And why I want to do this, and I know we'll go into this a little bit more in depth when we actually talk specifically about the channels themselves, is I really found when we put our whole team through a 6-month YouTube boot camp about 3 years ago, it was so eye-opening for us to just come out with a couple of goal statistics that we could put in our models and we could say, are we doing well or are we not doing well? Right? So these are some general traffic statistics that will help you guys know if you're doing well or you're not doing well. So in Facebook, if we're doing something based on optimizing it for a conversion event, and a conversion event would be a purchase, a lead, an appointment scheduled, anything that is the core event that we want to be targeting, we find that our CPM goal is we shoot for about $30 in most markets. It's pretty rare, but sometimes we get into super, super hyper competitive markets. We might be $60 CPM in very competitive marketplaces. When we're talking about click-through all, and this is obviously Facebook, remember, click-through all basically references anything to do with the creative, right? So it's based off of your images, your videos, that kind of that side of the ads, right? So it includes your link clicks, your likes, your comments, your shares, your clicks to expand on the photo or a click to watch the video. We're shooting for a click-through rate all of 3%. And that equates typically to a cost per click-through all of $1.50. When it comes to actually clicking the link to go to the place that we want them to go, that's a different percentage and a different cost. We're shooting for a minimum of 1% to 1.5% on our link click-throughs. And that typically equates for us on cold traffic of $3 to $5 per link click. When you're retargeting, it's very dependent on the size of your audience, but we will typically see retargeting clicks as high as $20 to $40. But the reality is that they know us so well that they usually convert much higher in the product or the funnel. So it still equates to the CPA that we want. And then this is a big one at the bottom that Andy wanted to make sure that we focused on in this media buyer training. This is actually the very first thing that we look at when we bring a client on, is we'll go to GTmetrix or we'll go to Google PageSpeed Insights and we'll run their store or their funnel or their offer. And we look to see how quickly the page loads. And when you're in Facebook specifically, you can see landing page views. And landing page views has sort of been this beta functionality forever. I don't know when it's going to come out of beta. So basically it's their way of saying we don't really know if it's accurate or not, but we still use it as one of our core variables. We want to see 80 as a minimum to 90% as a maximum of the link clicks actually hitting the landing page. And why this is important is because the majority of people who are running paid media are running them to very slow websites. And what we have found is that the bare minimum that we want to have pages loading at is 3 seconds, but ideally we'd get them sub 2 seconds. And the difference in conversions between our average client comes and they're about 6 to 8 seconds, which is an atrocity, right? The difference between them loading sub 3 seconds and 8 to 9 seconds is absolutely massive, because you got to think and to give you an estimate as well, most of the clients that come to us, they've got a 60% ratio when they get to us on clicks to landing page views. That means they're essentially throwing 40% of their traffic dollars into the garbage can on day one. So as a media buyer, if you can come in and say, okay, forget about the copy, forget about the images, forget about the videos, forget about the targeting, I'm going to increase your conversion rate by 25% by doing absolutely nothing. And that might be optimizing their page if you've got a good tech team to work with, or potentially even moving them to a faster loading platform, right? If you can get them to 80 to 90% from 50 to 60%, you just gave them 20 to 30% more sales before you even launched a campaign, right? So this is something that we track and is super, super important when it comes to media buying. Because again, it doesn't matter how good of a media buyer you are, if nobody actually makes it to the page, it doesn't really matter. So these are our general Facebook ad metrics.
And I wanted to,
Okay, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead, Andy.
No. The thing about landing page views is that we know that in Google ads, and more recently, you don't know this, Aaron, but I was speaking with our Facebook rep. It's actually, I've got several sources for this. Some are secret and some are not so secret. But the user experience will actually factor into your CPC. So if you're, for example, in Google, in the auction, in Google ads, if your landing page is slow, you will pay a higher CPC. There's a quality score associated with particularly Google search campaigns. And part of that is the landing page experience. So if your landing page is going to be twice as slow or slower than your competitors, then essentially you could be ending up paying double or even more for the clicks to get people to that, because Google and Facebook want to provide a good user experience. They don't care about us. Well, they do, but they don't at the same time. Their number one priority is the user. So if you look at it through the lens of the user, you'll be far more successful, which is why we look at that particular metrics on Facebook. But
yeah, and you can, and Andy makes a really good point there, and you can double check, right? You can check the clicks from whatever channel you're using to the core platform that you're on. And typically the core platform will have a registered amount of clicks on it as well. And you can see if they're aligning between the channel and the website just to double check your attribution. But what Andy's saying, and I'm surprised I forgot about it, I'm so glad he brought it up, is you actually get double penalized for slow speed on your lander. They charge you more from a CPM and a link click standpoint, and your user is annoyed. I don't know about you guys, but every time I go to a site, if it starts spinning on my phone, I'm like, peace out, right? I'm gone. So you get double penalized. You get penalized because you get charged more, and you get penalized because the user experience is trash, right? So this is a super, super important thing to look at right out of the gates before you start running traffic. We don't run any traffic with any client until we've done a speed check, and we've either optimized them or we have to rebuild, right? So it's a super, super important part to media buying that's often overlooked. If you guys want a great resource, there's a guy named Dan Wilkinson. I'm pretty sure he's British. You know, nothing against him for being British, Andy, but pretty sure he's British. And he has some unbelievable charts. It's specifically in the e-commerce space because he's a speed master on Shopify. And he will show the difference in revenue between 6 seconds 3 seconds and 1 second with actual clients in free training he does on YouTube and all these other areas. His whole business is built on improving the speed of Shopify stores. Can you imagine how important something must be if you can build an entire business around improving the speed, right? Think about how important that must be. So it's something that needs to really be focused on. All right, let's go to the next one. So next slide is general TikTok ad metrics, right? We find TikTok to be cheaper. So typically our CPM we're shooting for is $20. Again, the CTR is somewhere between 1% and 2.5%. We tend to see a little bit higher click-through rates off of TikTok. It equates to a cheaper cost per click. We're usually in the $1 to $3 range. And again, just beating the same drum, landing page views, we want to see 80 to 90% coming through there. Here's our general YouTube ad metrics, right? These are based on campaigns optimized for a single primary conversion action. CPM, $20 to $30 in most markets, a little bit higher in higher competitive markets than Facebook is $60 to $70. Click-through rate, you're aiming for a minimum of 1%, but with testing, you should be able to get to 2 to 3% from your video to your website. When it comes to the ad view rate, okay, we want to see a minimum of 20%. This is where we see a lot of people fall off, is their ad view rate can be in the 7 to 8%, which means their creative is not resonating with their audience. Andy, I don't know if you're off the top of your head, I'm kind of putting you on the spot. Do you have any idea what some of our highest view rates right now are on YouTube?
About 35%.
About 35%. Okay, so 20% is our minimum.
Yeah.
We're just constantly testing new creative to get over 20%. Our highest are in the 35% range.
Yeah.
So on US,
sorry, I just wanted to, we're going to talk about this more obviously on the actual specific training for YouTube, but that's within a 2-minute range. Okay. So obviously your ad view rate will go up if you've got a 40-second video. So you have to put it into context. So
that's a valid point.
I should have put actually, we should have put on there average 2-minute video length. Okay. Ad view rate.
Yeah. So let's put a bullet point in there that this is our average creative in YouTube is about 2 minutes. So on a 2-minute video, we're looking for an ad view rate of a low of 20% to 35%. Obviously, if you go sub 1 minute, you should be setting a higher ad view rate than 20%. And if you're going 10 minutes, you're going to set a lower one. Obviously, if you've got a 10-minute one and you're getting a 20% view rate, that's fantastic. You should definitely congratulate yourself there. But this is on a 2-minute video. So on US traffic cost per click, we're shooting for $2 to $4. And on Europe, 50 cents to $1.50 because it's not as competitive over there. So there's less people in the auction. So you can get cheaper clicks over there, but they're also not as used to buying digitally. So often the conversion rates are lower. So you're paying a lower cost per click, but you're also usually seeing a lower conversion rate. Again, landing page views, minimum 80%, maximum 90%. For those of you guys who are using Shopify stores, you're really going to have to do your research around, or WooCommerce, around all the different apps that go into Shopify or WooCommerce that slow the site down. You have to really look into optimizing images, optimizing videos. You know, you really got to do work on figuring out how to make your site load the fastest. And when you're working on information style funnels, right, you got to really do work on finding the right platform that gives you the highest speed load time. Or if you're on WordPress, really optimizing the heck out of that page, because it's super, super important. And a quick Google search, you know, I don't want to be flogging other people's things on this training, but a quick Google search will tell you exactly who the fastest loading platforms are. And the fastest loading ones are typically AMP designed, which is designed for mobile.
That's right.
Because you got to remember, if you go into any of your campaigns, you can see what devices people are coming from. And our last test on this 3 weeks ago,
Mhm.
was unless you're separating out your placements, which we don't do, we auto placement the majority of our stuff. You're going to see 80 to 90% coming from mobile. And the single biggest thing we see when we test clients is that their desktop versions load pretty quick and their mobile is trash. Well, if 80 or 90% of your people are coming from mobile, you need it to be the other way around, right? So I'm going to talk about basic funnel targets now, because we were talking about basic traffic goal metrics. And obviously with us giving you these three models, you're going to see the traffic and the funnels together. But, you know, for me, I think, Andy, we paid $10,000 for our team to go through the YouTube boot camp a couple of years ago. And the $10,000 would have been worth it to just know what the view rate and the click rate should be. Forget about everything else. That's like, just knowing what we should be shooting for was worth paying $10,000, right? So when we talk about these basic statistics, they should give you roadmaps to know whether you're doing well or you need work. So this is an example of an appointment funnel, right? If we were going opt-in to VSL page to calendar page to thank you page, we're looking for a minimum opt-in rate of 20%, but our goal is 40 and off the charts is 60%. Our cost per lead average ranges from $5 to $10 on average. Some are higher than that if they're, you know, hyper competitive or they're trying to get rid of people. Our VSL watch rate is Andy, are you talking about VSL watch rate here? Because you put this here as far as people clicking to watch the video or average consumption rate?
The actual consumption,
Okay, good. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. We don't have this in here, but you'll see it in the models. We want at least 50% of people to click the video, but the amount of average consumption of the video is a minimum 20%. And we typically only see that when we're starting with a client, because we consider that bad. Our target is 60% average consumption of the VSL.
Yeah.
One of the notes that we have here is test short VSLs as well, 2 to 4 minutes and longer, 10 to 20 minutes, because sometimes your audience likes short, punchy stuff, and sometimes they like a little bit more education. When we're going from the VSL clicking over to an application or a calendar page, so this is the call to action right below a VSL, we call that an initiate strategy session. That's the term you'll see in our models. We're looking for 10% of the people who hit our VSL to click the button below it, which is initiating the strategy session. And then once they get to the calendar after that, we're looking for a completion rate of 80% or higher. So if they saw the calendar, but they're lower than 80%, usually it means that the value hasn't been established or there's not enough calendar openings, or maybe there's a technical error. We see a lot of people embed calendars and now they've got double scrollers on the calendar. So on the phone, people can't find the scroll to actually book on the calendar. There's a bunch of issues that can stop it from being 80%. Our average cost per booking on Facebook and YouTube is $150 to $200 on Facebook and $175 to $250 on YouTube. Obviously, those are outliers, but again, we're talking about conservative models that you can hit. Our show rate that we're looking for, so if somebody books on a calendar, how many do we expect to actually show up? Our goal is 60%. And this is always a direct correlation between your email and your SMS follow-up. So for us, we do 4 email and 4 SMS reminders for every appointment that's scheduled. We do 1 immediately, we do 1 day of, we do 1 hour before, and we do 1 15 minutes before. And when we open up a client's tracking spreadsheet, and we see that 1 week they had a 60% show rate, and the next week they had a 38% show rate, the client always turns to us and says, the traffic and the quality is trash. What are you guys doing over there? And I say, go check your SMS credits on Twilio or whatever. And 9 times out of 10, they're out of credits on Twilio and nobody was getting SMS. So first and foremost, if you're below a show rate of 60%, make sure your emails and SMSs are set up properly and make sure they're firing, right? Are they going into a spam box? Are you out of credits, et cetera, et cetera? The close rate of people who showed up. Typically, if you're doing an appointment schedule model, you're probably selling a product in excess of $2,000 to $3,000. We sort of see the low in our agency of somewhere around 3,000 to a high of 30,000. Right? So this again is just a general number we're shooting for is 20 to 25%. If you're down in the 1,500 to 2,000 ratio, you're probably going to be higher than that. You certainly should be. And as you saw in the last example I had where the client was 15,000, they had a 17% close rate because it's a little bit higher of a price point. So again, these are basic averages for you guys to put inside of your models.
Yeah.
When we look at example for e-commerce, right? This is an example of a $20 e-commerce product, which would be considered a low-end e-commerce product, right? If we're talking about product page to add to cart to checkout to thank you, we're looking for an add to cart conversion rate of 10%, add to cart to checkout at 80%, and checkout to purchase at 90%, right? That's going to give us roughly a 6 to 7% conversion rate on a $20 product. When you start increasing the prices of your products, especially in e-commerce, it has a direct response to your conversion rate. If you go above, and we've seen this in hundreds of examples, if you go above $50 on your e-commerce product, you're probably going to cut these metrics in half. If you go 100 or above, you're going to cut them again in half, right? So that your conversion rates in e-commerce specifically are very responsive to the price of product that you're offering in the marketplace. All right. Oh, let's not talk about homework yet. Well, we can talk about homework. Your homework for this module is going to be to look at your product. And if you don't have a product, you're just trying to learn media buying, then choose one. Choose an industry, choose a product price, choose a funnel type, choose a channel, and build a model out from start to finish that you feel is conservative and doable based on what you've learned here, and also leveraging the models that we're going to provide for you. And set that aside. And if you're currently working on a product, right, maybe yours are going to be higher than what you've seen here as far as your conversions or your metrics are concerned. Maybe they're going to be lower, right? Take the data that you've put in here and just be realistic of you might be doing amazing and you might be doing terrible, right? Don't have any emotional attachment to it. Just take the model numbers that you've seen here and that we're going to share with you and put them beside what you currently have and look where you're winning and color code them red where you've got room for improvement. And that is going to dramatically clarify where you should be putting your focus in your media buying efforts moving forward. So I'm going to stop sharing screen. We're going to go back to questions. Again, I'm hoping that this is very useful, tangible information that you guys can put into play in your media buying efforts right away. I wish I had these when I started off, instead of it just being, am I profitable or am I not profitable? And then guessing what to do next. I know my team has certainly benefited from them tremendously. Let's take any other questions, Cecilia, maybe for the next 15 minutes or so.
All righty. Next up is Chris says, have you seen the structure of the funnel making the difference? All other things being equal, goods, ads, offer, sales, meaning free lead magnet to call for high dollar offer versus small paid offer to larger paid offer, etc.
It's a great question. I think I understand the question, which is, does the quality of prospect increase if they're buying something first, therefore changing the model metrics? The short answer to the question is yes, right? Your funnel structure is going to impact the metrics after the fact. So for example, if we're selling a book to somebody up front and then upselling a course, right? So I'll give you a real life example, and it's in one of the ones I'm going to send you. If we sell a $4.95 book and then we upsell a course to go along with it for $49 on the next step, we're going to see a 20% conversion rate. That's our goal metric. Now, if we do a lead magnet to selling that $49 course on the next page, we're going to see closer to a 6 to 7% conversion rate. So when people are buying from you first versus consuming information from you first, they're always going to be a higher quality of prospects. You need to adjust your model for that. When we see, I'll take an information example. If you come out in your ads, and we saw this with one of the groups we trained in the other day, and I think the person was running an agency offer. They basically came out and the first line was like, we'll pay you $10,000 if you don't double your money in 90 days. We're going to bring you on. It's going to be free. We're going to do all the creative. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. Well, that person's click-through rates are off the chart, and that person's cost per book call are low, and their cost per acquisition for a sale, even though it's not really a sale because they're basically saying we're going to do it all for free, right, is exponentially lower, right, than somebody who comes out and says in their ad, I only work with e-commerce stores in the supplement, industry, and I only work with clients who are doing at least $1 million a year in revenue and have at least $10,000 to pay me to do the job, right? In that particular case, you're going to have much lower click-through rates, right? But you're going to have a more ideal avatar or more ideal client on the background. You're probably going to pay 2 or 3 times as much in cost per acquisition, right? But you're going to have a more ideal avatar. So yes, a lot of this does have to do with the ad and offer structure. It will make it fluctuate, which is why we're giving you averages to start off. And then obviously if you start pulling levers in one way or the other, it's going to affect it. But you should be able to look at this and say, okay, well, if this is average, right? If I'm going to move one of these, then I'm going to see this difference in these numbers. And that's where it's a little bit art and science.
Yeah.
All right. So we have Ben who says, how can we factor in lead nurture over time, e.g. email? How can this be included in the model?
It's a great question. Andy, how would you speak to that?
So lead nature, I mean, first of all, we're looking at the models that we're showing here is just the front end direct response. How we factor it in really is answered down to more sophisticated analytical tools. In our case, we talked about Segmetrics on Tuesday, because that's absolutely true that we've mentioned this many times before, that 1 to 5% of people will actually take action through your funnel through paid advertising. The difficulty is attributing it beyond 30 days or something like that, which I also talked about on Tuesday. So the way we handle that is by using more sophisticated tools such as Segmetrics that will happily add in all the emails that you sent over the last 3 years or the last 30 years, and it will still attribute the actual value back to the original ad that you published 3 years ago. So the only way to do this is to look at some historical data if you have this. So if you know, for example, if you have the data in-house already, and you know that out of every, I don't know, on the average on the 50th email, there's an uptake, and you can see this sort of data in Google Analytics, by the way. It's what's known as the days to purchase or days to conversion. There's a report in Universal Analytics that will tell you that, how many people come in on the front end and how many come after it. So the only answer is to your question is that you need to look at your analytical tools if you have the data already, but then by all means you can factor it in by adding a line at the bottom of the model saying that expected future revenue would be X or Y or Z. Okay, so that's the only way you can add it in to sort of, but as long as you got data to prove it, either through the analytics tool or via the fact that you've got historical data, then by all means you can argue to the finance director and say, hey, look, the stats clearly show that we make another 50% of revenue within 30 days. So the actual true ROAS would be X and not Y. Does that make sense? I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and that's often an e-commerce versus info marketing conversation, because a ton of your revenue comes from e-commerce, from email and outside influence, right? When we look at the information models, like a strategy session funnel model, like the one I put up earlier, we actually take that into consideration, because maybe 40% of our booked calls might come from follow-up emails versus them just booking on the spot. So we actually factor that into the entire model from the get-go, where e-commerce, you've got to pull from the email nurturing series and maybe create another line item.
Yeah. And if you remember that report that we were showing, the client reporting, you can actually see that there were longer time frames, right? You saw a 7-day window, you saw a 30-day window, and you see it sort of over the last quarter. So we actually do report that when we send that into our clients ourselves. So hopefully that answers the question. Great. If
So-
not, let us know, Ben. We'll elaborate for you more.
Great. Kevin is asking, two-part question. Do you ever work towards the ideal or standard goal metrics, e.g. starting lower ones at outset and raising over time, especially when experimenting with newer product or program? And how often, if at all, will the goal metrics change?
Okay, so that's a great question. So I'm going to always say when it's something new, right, be conservative with the client. When we're working with the clients that we're working with, they often come from similar industries with funnels that we're very familiar with. So internally, we use our goal metrics as if they're already an established client, right? We also feel confident enough to show the client the metrics that we plan to hit because those expectations are set from the beginning. But I'm not opposed to the idea of having your own internal goal metrics that you have and then showing the client a slightly lower one to set expectations properly and not bury yourself with false expectations, especially if it's new and it's something that you're not familiar with, right? With regards to how often do we change the goal metrics in our model, we change pricing like cost per click and things like that about once per year, because we feel like it's pretty dramatic in the channels. They'll go up maybe 15%, 20%. Yeah. When I'm looking at an element inside of the funnel, we typically will change it based on what we're seeing as an overall average of how skilled we are becoming. So if all of a sudden the average, let's say on an opt-in page, has gone up from 30% to 40% overall, then we'll adjust internally as we become more skilled with our testing in those different areas. But again, I'm always cognizant of setting false expectations to the client, because, if you set it like, hey, our best person is getting 60%, let's just throw 60% in there. That's an outlier in your situation. And all they're going to look at every week is, well, why is that not 60%? Right. So I would way rather you stay on the conservative side than the aggressive side when you're building your models. And the other thing is, if you have a team or even just you personally, right? Nobody likes to see reds all the time. They like to see greens, right? So if you set it from a conservative standpoint and you get all in green, you can keep improving it. But if you set it too high and it's just red all the time, your team feels like trash. You feel like trash. Clients unhappy, right? So be conservative in their eyes.
Yeah.
And then if you want to be more aggressive internally, you could be more aggressive internally.
Great. So the next question we have is from Victoria. Two-part question. Lots of two-part questions. Do you ever work towards the idea? Oh, wait, sorry.
What is the first conversion action?
I'm sorry. It's Natalie. I'm very sorry. We have so many questions here. I got lost for a second. Natalie says, what traffic do you rely on to build up your retargeting list, especially if it's a brand new product/website?
What traffic do we work on to build up our retargeting list?
Rely on.
Let me put some context, because I answered another question from Natalie, who said the following. I asked the question: for e-commerce, do you use traffic campaigns in the beginning to gain more traffic? If so, do you optimize for link clicks or landing page views? No, we never do traffic campaigns, Natalie. We always start with conversion campaigns, even on brand new stores. So your follow-up question is, what traffic do you rely on to build up your retargeting list, especially if it's a brand new product website? So we're collecting essentially in the context of Facebook, and we'll cover this a little bit more in the actual Facebook social ad session, but we're building up retargeting. We have different retargeting stacks. So for example, if you've got a VSL funnel and people have opted in, but they haven't actually taken the appointment, we'll actually create a custom audience from people that visited the URL where the calendar is located, or rather where the VSL page is related. So that's the traffic that we rely on, is what people have visited in the funnel itself. So I'm not sure if
That's a really good point. I think what she was asking is, what do we use to build awareness to then retarget? So if you go back to our content mapping manufacturing fame strategy, we typically use video views at the top of funnel to gather awareness and then retarget. The other nice thing about models is if you're overlooking anybody or you're running your own campaign, we hired a media buyer, I don't know, about 7 months ago, you know who it is, Andy, where he showed me his model stats after the first week and his cost per click was 35 cents. And I'd set it at $3. And he came in going, look at me, look at me. And I said to him, you screwed something up badly. And that's the nice thing about having a model. He said, why? I have 35-cent clicks. I said, probably because you optimized for clicks, which are trash traffic. And sure enough, we pulled open his campaigns and they were optimized for clicks and it was trash and he was making no sales, right? I said, go switch these all to being optimized for lead instead of optimized for clicks. And now you should see $3 clicks, not 35-cent clicks, right? So that's the other nice thing about having a model is if something's like so ridiculously good, you can go, wait a minute, hold on a second. Something's not set up right? It's not realistic, right? No. But as far as if we're optimizing for e-commerce, we're always optimizing for video view or purchase. Yeah, that's it. Those are the only two elements we ever optimize for in Facebook and Instagram. If we're optimizing in an information funnel, we're only optimizing ever for video view, lead, appointment scheduled, very rarely purchase because it's so far down the line that we can't get enough data in there. So it's typically lead or appointment scheduled, and we're building awareness through video views, not through link clicks or website visits or any that stuff is all fraudulent garbage traffic.
Yeah. I don't know if I answered, there was a little bit of confusion there, Natalie, but there are sort of two types of retargeting. You've got top of funnel video, which you're doing, and then you're going to set up a retargeting audience based on the video views, 25%, 10-second views, et cetera, et cetera. That's right. The top of funnel. Then when you're actually going and you're saying, okay, now I want to sell something, I want to actually make a purchase, I want them to purchase something from the e-commerce store, then you're not going to use traffic campaigns, you're going to use conversion campaigns. So and on the retargeting, you're going to retarget people that abandon the cart, the typical sort of things that you're going to be doing, which are audiences that can be created for you, I think pretty much directly now from Shopify. Yep. But if not, you just go ahead and create it. It's just off the event called Initiate Checkout, that's all.
Yeah, when we're doing an information funnel and we're retargeting somebody post them seeing a direct response ad that was optimized for conversion, then Andy makes a really good point. Let's say we've got a book funnel and somebody bought a book and they didn't take an upsell. And our last call to action was to book an appointment with a salesperson, right? Then we will retarget that buyer back to a page that summarizes what they got and what they learned with a call to action to book to a calendar page. We wouldn't retarget them back to the book page because they already bought the book, right? So we would retarget them further down the funnel.
Yeah. But if there's any more questions, just let us know, obviously, in Slack, okay?
Great. Nicholas has a question, and he says, how realistic is trying to get a high score if you use Google's page speed as a standard? It's almost impossible to match their requirement, or do we just try our best so that we are not slower than our competition?
Yeah, I got a partial answer for that, but go ahead, Aaron.
But no, I'm willing to hear your answer. My answer was, there is no weakness. We do not accept weakness here.
Yeah. And somehow I knew you were going to say that. Yes, I understand, Nicholas, but I mean, it is Google, and Google have their view and their worldview and looking at things. So we use other tools as well. We mentioned GTmetrix, but another good one is Pingdom. You can do the Pingdom test from different locations with different internet speeds. So go and check out the tool. I think it's tools.pingdom.com. So try to look at everything through different, because each one will report different results. What does happen on GTmetrix, funnily enough, is when you're sending traffic to an AMP-based page, which is accelerated mobile pages, you'll find that they'll always go 99% on GTmetrix. They'll go very high on GTmetrix and Google alike, obviously, because AMP is Google technology. So. But yes, Aaron, you're right as well. There's no weakness. Just get it done.
No. We're here to be assassins. We do not accept weakness.
We do not accept weakness in our clan. That's right. Absolutely.
I have a three-parter from Malcolm, so let's get
Go
ready.
for it.
So
Cool.
CTR, is that rate total number of people that do the target action on that ad divided by the total number of people that see ad?
Let me,
Correct.
to clarify, that's CTR all. So CTR in Facebook, it's very different. If you pull up the slide again, Aaron,
Sure.
you've got where we talk about the Facebook metrics right at the end there, or towards the
Yeah,
end.
I'll share it right now. Hold on.
Yeah. So CTR all, if we look at CTR all, okay, so that includes on a Facebook ad, you've got lots of components. You've got like people liking it, you've got people commenting, you've got clicks to a Facebook page. So CTR all takes into account whatever number of clicks have occurred on or around the ad divided by the number of impressions. I'm pretty sure it's impressions, not people.
It's both. It's both for link click through and for CTRL.
Right. Okay. So that's that one. But there's a second part to your question, which is link through rate. Is that clicking through on the lander? That is
That's click. Oh, go ahead, Andy. I thought you were asking me.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's clicking through to the core action that's in the ad itself. So for us, for Facebook, for example, we will always put the link to whatever we're selling in the copy itself. And then we'll also have the call to action button, which most people use. Learn more seems to sort of be the de facto that most people use. That they can click off to whatever. That's your link click through rate. And it's a combination of the button and a link inside of your copy if you use it. Right. But I think it's a good opportunity. I mean, I know we'll cover it later on, but just trying to give as much value as I can. When your click-through rate all is low, it's because your image, your video, your thumbnail, or your audience is just off. It's the creative element that is disrupting people to engage with the ad.
Correct.
When your link click-through rate is off, it is because the value of the next step, typically in your copy, whether it's written copy or in the copy of the image or video itself, is not compelling enough. There is an offer to audience misalignment. So oftentimes we will see one or two of them off, right? If we look at the example, and I can scroll back to this guy right here. One of the reasons that this click-through rate all is low for this particular guy is that he chooses to focus heavily. He's marketing to IT professionals, trying to get them to upskill their career. There's only so much flashiness that you can do in the creative on marketing to IT people, trying to get them to upskill their career. So we really struggle in the creative side to get that above 3%. And his link click-through rate is lower than we want it to be because he filters people very hard in his copy and basically says, if you want this, and if you want this, and if you want this, click through. If you're any one of these types of people, hit the bricks because I don't want you. So he does a lot of filtration in his copy, which as a result gets us a lower link click-through rate than we want from a traditional ad perspective. But the most important thing is obviously the bottom line, which is return on ad spend. And he's at 19x. So he's like, leave my ads alone. They're amazing. And I don't care if it's got a 0.5 link click-through rate. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah.
Yes. And then he's also asking, how are you calculating landing page views?
That's just a metric built into Facebook ads.
Yeah, that's you can actually see it in Google as well. Can you not, Andy?
No, you have to create what's known as you have to create a custom conversion action. We'll talk about that more actually in the Google session as well.
Yeah, you can set it up. It's not a de facto event in Google, but you can set it up. But what we do is we look at this number, right? See outbound clicks 2000. Oh, that's not a spreadsheet. It's a picture. You look at outbound clicks 2007, right? What you should do is you should look at what's being shown in your ads dashboard, i.e. if you created a custom conversion in Google or the de facto one in Facebook, and then you should actually go to the destination URL, whether you're on ClickFunnels or Shopify or whatever, and just double check how accurate that number is on the end result, wherever they're going to, and see how well it lines up with what you're seeing in the traffic dashboard. Because occasionally, it can be one way or the other. It could show way more clicks, so they are getting through on the destination location, or it can show, way less, right? So you want to make sure that you're looking at the attribution on both the destination and in the dashboard itself, and then obviously making a judgment call off that. But it all begins at your speed load testing that you would do ahead of time.
Great. So Justin's asking, are there any good resources for building VSLs?
Ooh, that's a great question. You guys got to have something amazing at Digital Marketer, don't you?
You got to have something there.
I'm sure we do. I don't know. I don't know what VSL stands for.
It's video sales letter.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I didn't know VSL.
Yeah.
These acronyms and things.
Yeah, no, it's like a different language. I'm pretty sure I've been through one of the Digital Marketer VSL trainings. It's very, very good. There's a million of them out there. I'm brain farting on what would be other great resources. I'll have a look and I'll put it in Slack.
Yeah. And we'll upload it to the course page. Yeah. So all these shortened things. Okay. So the next one is from Nicholas, who says, how about a super low end product, say $10? Do we increase the metrics by 50%? Is it a linear relationship like that?
It's talking about e-commerce specifically.
I don't know if Nicholas, if you're talking about
e-commerce, are you talking about e-commerce or are you talking about info or other?
E-commerce.
Yeah, the lowest that I've ever been able to get it to go in e-commerce it depends on how we frame it. When I've sold anything under $10, the best I've ever been able to get from a purchase conversion is 15%. That's been my high, right? Mm-hmm. And then once I kind of got over 10, then it seemed to regulate at about 7 to 8%. And I did a lot of testing to do it. And so and again, to answer your question in short, yeah, it almost doubles when you go below $10. $10 is a really interesting psychological threshold. So is 20, and then 20 to 50 seems to hold itself all the way there. And then 50 to 100 doubles again. And then when you get over 100, it's kind of weird. It doesn't fluctuate as much. Like you'd think, well, maybe when it gets to 200, it doubles. It doesn't really. It comes down to value perception in the marketplace, because the average conversion right now in e-commerce across the board, I believe last time I checked, is 1.8% across all products. So, it's going to come down to split testing for you above 100, but the highest that I was able to ever achieve sub $10 was 15%. If you're beating me, great. But if I was coming in with a model today and somebody said my product is $7.95, I would set it at 15%.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Because ours is at like $12.99, the lowest.
Like your lowest cost of product?
Yeah, like the lowest price. And like oftentimes that's like an entry product before they get to experience other signature products. So that's why I'm curious.
And what's your conversion right now on the $12.95 product?
Oh, sure. I don't know if the $12.99, but across the board, it's about 4.5. Which
is probably good blended if you got stuff above 12.9, above 12.95. Yeah. I would be surprised if your blended is 4 and change. If your conversion rate on the $12.95 is probably not pretty close to what I'm talking about, which is in the 7 to 8%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to do some digging on that.
Do some digging on it. The other thing with e-commerce on lower priced products is and really it actually goes for any price product in e-commerce, is if you outline the price of the product in the ad and why it's such a great deal today, you will always increase the conversion rate when they get there, because there's no price sticker shock or surprise when they get there, right? So if you say like, hey, we've got XYZ, it's usually $19.95, but today you're getting it for $12.95, versus just having a description of the product and they end up at the product and it's $12.95, you will always see a higher conversion rate because they know about it before they get there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's the same we see with book funnels, right? If we're selling a digital book or we're selling a physical book or whatever, and in the ad we say, hey, typically this book is $19.95, but today for the next 100 only, you can get it for just the price of shipping and handling at $9.95, save 50%, click below. They're already preconditioned for the price when they get there. So the conversion is much higher than if we just said, hey, buy this book, click here, and then they see $9.95.
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Got it. We have 2 questions left.
Okay.
Home stretch. Okay, so Ben's asking, what are your thoughts on Facebook forms to VSL page? This is for an appointment funnel.
Mm-hmm. So we've been testing Facebook forms to VSL. And obviously, if you're using Facebook forms, you know that it goes form, thank you page. They have to click to get to the VSL page after that, right? So what we've actually found is that when Facebook launched forms originally, the traffic was terrible. Now at scale, we're often incorporating lead ads into whatever we're doing for 2 reasons. One is to build the list, and 2, because the lead is exponentially cheaper. The problem on the list building side is, I don't know about you guys, I haven't used my real email and Facebook in about 9 years. So if people don't check that email box, the nurturing side gets a bit lost, right? So what we've tested in two different specific accounts I'm talking about right now is, one, we've done lead form right to a page where people can book with an appointment, somebody that's like a setter right away. And that's worked really well for cheap appointments. And the other one is to click through to the VSL, right? And what we found in the beginning of that test is it was very difficult to get cost per booked appointments within the model pricing that we wanted. But when we left it for 10 days, the follow-up email nurturing series ended up bringing the cost per booked appointment way down over time. But most people don't have enough patience to run it for the time it needs to see the true benefit of it. Exactly. So we will typically add in lead form for appointment setting in as a phase 2. Actually, is it phase 2, Andy, or phase 3? I can't remember of our 60-day roadmap. I think it's phase 3 or 4.
Phase 3.
Because it's great for lead building. It's great for cheap leads, great for list building. And if you leave it long enough, you can bring your cost per booked appointment down. And some of them are our best performing campaigns now.
Yep.
Got it. Great. So I have one more question and also then a comment. So Kevin says, at your level of accounts, what do you consider not enough data at lower stages of funnel, and what is the threshold?
Andy loves that question.
No, I need to repeat that one.
What he wants to know what you consider statistical relevancy in putting people through a funnel.
Okay, that's a great question. Generally speaking, I'm looking for, are you talking about volumes? This question is whether it's volume or whether it's a duration. Generally speaking, in durations, I'm looking for at least 30 to somewhere between minimum of 30 days up to 90 days of data. Okay. The reason I say 90 days is because obviously there's seasonality involved. And there are obviously, I think there was actually a question not that long ago in Slack today about how do we deal with seasonality, and I'll answer that one separately. But in terms of actually what is statistically valid, you've got to look at least 30 days of data, and my ideal target is 90 days. So if you can get hold of 90 days of data, that's what I would consider reasonably valid. In terms of, there's lots of complications or math around the meaning of statistical validity. So you've got 95% confidence levels, 98%, 99% confidence levels. that's really related to, for example, when you're doing split testing on what is absolutely reasonable before you can discard something as something happened by chance, or whether statistically speaking, it's probable that that result will continue within the context of a time frame. So it's a bit of a complex answer to look for, but I tend to look at time frames. So when a client comes on, we do a lot of auditing before we take a client on, not only because we want to make sure that we can actually help them and get a result, and that's where our models come in as well, but I'm often looking at the data over 30, 60, 90 days. And the reason is because I want to see if there's enough proof to see that we can actually help them. I don't know if that answers the question or not. It's perhaps a little bit indirect, but
well, it's
very complex.
the problem is that Andy and I come from two different worlds. So Andy comes from the Fortune 500 world, where they've got tons of money and they don't care, and they want real statistical relevance, which could take 1,000 years, 2,000 visits, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. And I come from the dirty, grimy, this is my last $500. I need to make a sale world. So for me, it depends on the channel. The problem with YouTube is that it takes about 3 days from launching a campaign to actually get the right traffic in there. So we don't recommend really looking at anything for 3 days in Google, right? In Facebook, you can get the answer much quicker. So for me, I'm not going to spend probably more than, I'm super hyper aggressive. Like, I'm not spending more than $10 on an ad set and getting the result I want before I kill it off. Cause I can launch so many other ad sets and so many other audiences that, like, I'm like 10 to 15 bucks and I'm out, and I want that data quickly. So I'll set my ad sets at like $100 and I'll look at them 40 times in a day like a crackhead, and I'll shut them off when they hit 10 and they don't give me what I want. So, you know, I feel like Facebook is one of the, I feel like the learning, what do they call it? Learning mode. I feel like learning mode in Facebook is the biggest scam in the history of advertising. And they just want you to spend way more money for way more time, you know, when the reality is, you know, right away. Like, if I turn on a campaign in Facebook and I'm running to a specific creative with a specific audience that I think is going to work, and my goal metric is $3 for a link click, and it costs me 10, that thing's getting shut off at 10.
Yes.
It's going away, and I'll launch a different audience. I'll launch a different ad set. I'm much more aggressive when it comes to launching on Facebook than it is on Google.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, I think this is it's a little bit of a difficult answer because it depends on how much budget you're working with, who you're serving, et cetera, et cetera. In a real answer for you, I would say don't look at anything less than 100 events as statistical relevancy. So 100 clicks, 100 page visits, 100 purchases. That's sort of a rule of thumb, but everything comes down to situational when it comes down to budget and timelines for testing, because it really comes down to who you're serving, to be honest, and what channel you're on.
Yeah, and I've just seen Kevin's question again. I'm just reading it through. At your level of accounts, what do you consider not enough data at lower stages of funnel? So lower stages funnel is what you're referring to, Aaron, which is essentially you're going to launch a conversion campaign. You want to get leads. You want to find out when to shut something off or switch over to another target, another creative, and all the rest of it. Yes, I agree with you there. I thought I misunderstood perhaps the question a little bit, Kevin, but generally speaking, we are quite aggressive quite quickly in Facebook, but not in YouTube. And the reason is because the platforms behave very differently. Their algorithms are very different. So YouTube, we will probably wait 5 days minimum before we decide to turn something off. Because what can happen is that you set the campaign up with maximized conversions, you spend $100 a day, you come to the end of day 3, you've got no result whatsoever, and then boom, in day 4, suddenly you'll get 50 leads and you have no idea why they came in. That's just the way the Google algorithm works, and it depends on the audiences. What we find with Facebook is that it's a much more responsive platform in terms of getting data. So when you get like 100 people, 100 clicks, and you still haven't gotten a lead, or you spend, we have a rule which is like 1.5 times our KPI. So for example, in the model, if the KPI is $10 a lead, let's say, we're not going to spend more than $15 on a particular ad before we shut it off. Okay, we're going to say we spent $15. That's enough. We've had enough. Doesn't matter how many impressions we've had. It doesn't matter what else we've done. As soon as we've got a CPA or a cost per lead of $10, as soon as we've spent 15, it's off, baby, and we're on to the next one.
Yeah, like I'm a legit psychopath in Facebook.
Yes,
I
you
will
are, yeah.
I will launch 10 campaigns with 10 ad sets in them each at $20 each, and I'll have my model statistics in front of me, and I'll look at the very first metric, which for me is cost per link click, and I will log in that first day 50 times. And I will have them all lined up, and I will refresh. And if it goes above 10, I'm like dead. And I'll get down to maybe 6 or 7 that are winners. And then they get to live until the next stage. So if they're getting the clicks I want, then I'm looking at the opt-in, right? And I'm going, if my opt-in goal cost is $15 or whatever, as soon as you get to 16, you're dead to me, and I'm shutting you off. But I can do that because I'm going to be actively in there all day long. And so I'm okay with turning things off rapidly and testing rapidly. And that's why we can typically get to where we want to be in 3 to 5 days versus 3 to 4 weeks, right? When I see people come in with 3 campaigns and 1 ad set each, and they've spent $500 on each one, I'm like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah, that's
right.
crazy.
So I am a rapid tester and a rapid killer in Facebook. Rapid. Yeah. I mean, when I know that Nicholas will appreciate this. When I had my e-commerce store, Nicholas, I launched 100 campaigns a day and 100 ad sets a day at $100 each per day. And I just killed all day long. And if they lived, they lived. If they died, they died. And I was relaunching the next day. And that's how I took my store from 0 a day to 65,000 a day in 3 months, like just full blown psychopath on launching and killing ads.
Go ahead, Kevin. You wanted to say sorry.
Yeah, thanks so much for those answers. That was great. It was triggered by what Aaron said when he was going through the steps in the funnel, and he said, "Oh, but we won't even optimize that step because not enough people basically will convert."
Yeah, it's a good observation. Like when we're first starting out, let's say I'll use a real estate guy as an example that we're working with right now. In the first week, he didn't even have enough people get to the booked appointments to even have data in the bottom. Like they didn't get there yet, right? So all focus was in the top ads, Lander, like everything was there for the first 2 to 3 weeks, and then once that was dialed in and people were actually getting down over here, then we started to have data down here to look at, right? Like it takes a while for everybody to get through, especially with them. They started with like a $50 a day budget or something. And I'm going, well, our average cost per booked appointment is going to be $250. Like if we hit this thing perfect, you're going to get 1 appointment in 5 days, right? And that's with no optimization. Like you're killing me, right? With that budget. So it is a bit of a challenge when they come in with small budgets, right? At first you have to focus on all of your metrics at the top, right? In the beginning, your click-through rates, your CPMs, maybe your opt-ins, right? Like all of your focus has to be there until enough traffic has been able to flow through the bottom. So I think that's kind of where the question is derived. Like for us, we don't take a client on, and this is an important thing. Like if you're working with clients, or you're working for a company, you have to really clearly outline what your budget is going to be in the beginning. And if they give you a garbage budget, you got to push back against them. Like nobody's allowed to come in with less than an additional $150 a day to work with us. Because if we build the model out and we say, look, like it was going to take 2 weeks to get a conversion, like that's insane, right? So you have to set that expectation too, that there has to be an ad budget, that's reasonable so you can get some data in to make optimizations.
That's great. Okay. I hope that Kevin got what he was saying out, because I have one comment question from Hi saying, Can you please include a model for the appointment funnel that has both a core offer and an upsell?
So you want to have a model created for the core offer. Let's just throw out a number. Say the core offer is $5,000 and the upsell is what? 10,000, 15,000, 20,000? Is that what you're saying?
Well, the question also extends to, or discuss the typical stats for an info product funnel with a strategy session that leads to a core offer and then an upsell.
So I'd have to have a little bit more data. Like, are we talking about a lead magnet? Are we talking about a book? Are we talking about other? So I think probably makes more sense to put that into Slack for me, because I have all the models. So, I highly doubt that you don't have one that I don't have. So I'll make an exception and add one more. I don't want to do one for all 50 people that are in this cohort, but send me over what you got and I'll modify it and add an additional one.
Is that okay, Mihai? He's on the call, yeah.
Yeah, I can see him. He said, yeah, we're good.
We have 2 more questions.
Okay.
And I don't know if you want to stay. I know we're going over our time, but if you want to answer them, then
I'm looking at Andy's schedule. Andy's got to bounce. He's got a hard stop at the top of this hour. I will stay for 2 more.
Yep.
Okay. And hopefully they'll be quick. So Justin's asking, what initial metrics are you looking at with that first $10 just link clicks?
Yeah, if I've got a $10 a day budget and I'm coming out of the gates, I do it when I'm testing. I do it by looking at each stage of the model metrics. So let's say I'm coming out with a $10 budget, and let's say I'm on Facebook, for example, then the first thing I'm looking at is link clicks. That's the only thing that matters to me at that point. If I'm paying, if my goal is $3 or less, anything that's $3 or less, I'm keeping. Anything that's more than $3, I'm jetting, right? But keeping in mind, if I'm given a $50 a day ad budget, let's just say, I'm probably launching 20 of them at $10 a day, because I'm killing them so fast. I'm only spending $4 per or whatever it is before I've killed it, right? So hopefully that makes sense. If it makes it past my first sniff test on a $3 link click, then I'm shifting to the next metric over. Is it add to cart? Is it lead? Is it whatever, right? So if my goal at that point is I want a $3 link click, but I want a $15 add to cart, then that one gets to live to $15. And if I don't see an add to cart by $15, it's dead. But I'm not doing it with just one. I'm doing it with like 10, right? So that I've got lots of irons in the fire to come out with a winner, right? If it makes it to add to cart at $15 and my goal cost per acquisition on purchase is $50, then I might give it a little bit more rope because I've already cleared 2 hurdles. I might give it to 60 or 65 and see if it zones in. But if it doesn't, it gets killed. So I'm not emotionally attached to the metrics. Like, I think so many media buyers are like, man, but the creative is so good and the audience is so good. It's in learning mode. It's not in learning mode. Something's wrong. So, kill it and try something else, because when you know, I don't know if you've been through this, Nicholas, or not, but we would do product development and I would do images on e-commerce. And once every 2 weeks, I would come with 10 new product ideas with 10 images with them. And I would launch them. And it would take me on average 30 products to find one decent product that was a product to market match. And it would take me about 1 in 50 to find something that was going to blow the door off. And when it blows the door off, right away. The very first day, this is the right product for this audience, period. There is no debating it. You'll be like, holy crap. It just goes bananas, right? So, right away. And if you're like, the numbers are okay, they're not okay. They're bad, right? You'll know when you've hit it right away.
Got it. Okay, let me get back to my question now. Victoria's question. How do you account for the upsells and downsells and metrics?
So, you have to know, and this is a little bit of experience, right? What your upsell and downsell conversions should be from historically running those products. So if you've never run one before, right? I'll give you some examples. If I'm going to launch a $50 upsell to a buyer, I typically know that I'm going to convert that, if it's scripted properly and positioned properly, at around 20%. If I do a $100 upsell and it's scripted properly and it's positioned properly, I'm going to do it at about 10%, right? I know that from my historical stuff. If I downsell off of one of them, right, from a 50 to say a $29.95 or a $19.95, or a downsell from a 100 to a 50, right? I'm probably going to get about the same conversion on the downsell as I would have got on the upsell. So if it was 20, it's going to be 20. If it's 10, it's going to be 10, right? So it's a little bit art and science, because you have to have run it for a while to know. So you kind of got to make an estimated best guess. But then once you have that estimated best guess, then you can keep putting them in the model. Like below your first product sale, you can be upsell one conversion rate, upsell one actual sales, upsell one revenue, ROAS after one upsell, and then you can go downsell, and you can keep tracking it down. So you can have ROAS from the first product, ROAS from upsells, ROAS from downsells, full ROAS, and you just keep working your way through and making that estimated best guess. And you can adjust it over time. Obviously, if you're seeing, I'm trying everything and this is just where it's at, or it's blowing the doors off and it's getting me 30% conversion rate, then you can adjust it over time.
All right, great.
And I think that, and I've heard this question 3 times now, so I want to address it, right? I'm trying to give you guys baselines to work off of. I can't factor in every variable you have to have the perfect model for you. Some of it's going to be having to look at these numbers and look at your industry and look at your product price and go, okay, well, he says it should be this as an average. Am I going to be a little higher? Am I going to be a little lower? Okay, I feel safe guessing here and then adjusting as you go. But even just having a guesstimate average baseline and having it written out is exponentially better than having nothing.
Better than nothing.
I can't believe you guys all stayed for 2 hours on this call.
I know, and I'm sure they would still keep going if we if we didn't all have jobs that we're supposed to be doing right now, instead of this. But this is so interesting. So, but I think that we have to. I know Mahai is like, no, don't go, but we have things to do today. So I think we'll stop there if that's all right.
That's fine. If there's any more, just pop them into Slack. We try to be pretty good about answering them pretty quickly.
Yeah, there were 2 questions left. It's just the 2 questions with you guys though is like 47 minutes because
I know I talk too loud. I talk too much. I apologize.
No, it's not too much. It's so detailed and amazing. It's so, but I'll make sure to put them in the Slack for you. So I'm sure, as everyone would say, thank you so much for today. It was amazing. I don't know how you would have put all of this into just Tuesday.
No, it was virtual. I was going to have to like rip through it all, and then it'd be over their head. And so by doing an extra day, which ended up 2 hours, I think we got way more use out of this session.
Yes, I think so too. And this recording is going to be available later this afternoon for anyone that had to leave early. So it will be there. I'll post the link in the chat, and then we're back here on Tuesday for our next session. And so if there's nothing else from you, Aaron, I think that we're good to go, and we'll see you back on Tuesday. And thank you so much again.
All right. Thanks for being here, guys. We'll see you next Tuesday.
Bye, guys. Thanks so much.